We hope you enjoy this episode of the Modern Divorce Podcast. But first, an important message for our listeners.
Hi, this is attorney Billie Tarascio, and my partner Julie and I have created a resource for you if you are representing yourself in family court. No one should go into family court without knowing the basics, and we will teach you everything you need to know at Win Without Law School to represent yourself with confidence. We'll teach you how to get exhibits in, how to draft your pretrial statements, and how to speak to the judge so the judge will listen. We'll teach you how to defend against false accusations and everything you need to know to be an effective advocate, both if you're negotiating or if you're presenting evidence. Don't wait. Go to winwithoutlawschool.com. We can help you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Modern Divorce Podcast. I'm your host, Billie Tarascio, joined today by Brian King. He owns one of the largest family law attorneys in the entire country. Great guy, good friend of mine. Brian, welcome to the show.
Billie, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to get a chance to chat with you again.
We are going to cover a topic that people want to talk about, and that is Brian and I both manage lawyers. And many people wonder, is my lawyer doing what they should be doing? Should I be complaining about my lawyer? Should I switch my family law attorney? Or is this part of the process and I just need to change my expectations? So before we dive into that topic, which I know people are really going to want to hear about, Brian, tell me about your firm and what you do.
Well, thanks so much. I've been practicing since 1998, and I'm sure that some of your listeners are detecting that I'm from the South. I'm from the Carolinas. I'm in North Carolina. I have a North and South Carolina license. I'm a family law specialist, and we have 67 attorneys as of today in 22 locations around the Carolinas. We're opening up Tennessee in October, so we continue to extend on. And I am so excited about this topic, because not only is it been my life and what I work with attorneys and awesome attorneys, but I've also gone through divorce myself. I've been a single parent, and I've hired other lawyers for those purposes because I've learned that even when we're going through it ourselves, sometimes you have to step back. So I can talk about this from a lot of different perspectives, and it's something that is really on my heart because I know that clients have that feeling of like, okay, I don't know what to do, and I don't know if my lawyer might be part of the problem. So love to be able to chat with you and love being able to catch up with you.
Well, congratulations on your expansion to Tennessee. That's exciting. Very good stuff. All right. So when a client isn't sure whether or not their lawyer is acting in their best interest, what would you say the client's first step should be?
Yeah, I think that first of all, and Billie, I know that this is something, and you've done such an awesome job with your team, and I know that you've been in the trenches yourself, being that attorney and going through this process. First and foremost, you need to be able to have a discussion with your attorney, and hopefully this is something that happens very early on in your representation, where they help you set the expectation of the case. Because, I think a lot of clients come in and, usually, and we around our office have several tenants, and one of those tenants is FTFT. One of my intake members kind of coined that phrase, and we picked it up over the last decade. And FTFT is first time for them because most of the time, our clients, it's the first time they've ever really dealt with a lawyer, at least in that way. I mean, they may have had a home closing, they may have done a will or something like that, but this is the first time that they've got an attorney and an issue that they can't get through themselves. And I think that one of the first things that FTFT for us means, we've got to give you a solid opinion of what's going on in your case. Because clients come in and they think, oh, well, my aunt got through this, or my girlfriend group, they told me that I can get through this in 6 months. And that, and I tell my attorneys all the time, there's somebody talking to your client saying, you don't need a lawyer. While you've done a great job of telling people like, hey, there's a lot of this that you can do yourself. One of the things that you cannot do yourself is know the expectations. Well, your attorney needs to be a part of that. And one of the things I look for when I see these kind of things bubbling up in a client of our firm's mind is I want to talk to my attorney and say, what are the expectations that you have set with the client? Because oftentimes when that step is skipped, and I think, I'm sure that you can talk a little bit about this, but at that early stage, a lot of times you're just worried about the emergency in front of you. You're
Right.
not thinking about that long term of what this is going to be. And almost every case is going to have some of that. So for me, I think the first thing is were expectations set at that early stage? I assume that that's the kind of thing that you do as well with your clients.
I mean, absolutely. It's all about the relationship and communication. And usually when people know what's coming and what to expect, and they understand the process, they understand where they're at in the process, they understand why theirs might be different from somebody else's, they're going to be a lot happier. But of course, some lawyers are better at communicating than others. You've got 67 of them. How do you manage to make sure that your lawyers are communicating and setting expectations?
Well, that's I think that anytime you scale a business of any sort, you're going to do that through processes. And of course, sometimes people will say, like, "My goodness, 67 attorneys, that must be like herding cats." And I say, like, no, it's more like herding sharks because they're nipping at each other at the same time as they are going through. But I have a great group. But of course, I mean, you're talking about attorneys from every different kind of walk and relationships and things like that goes into it. So we have a certain amount of processes that we do to make sure that no matter whether you're a client going into our Marion, North Carolina office, population 1,200, or in our Charlotte office that's much larger, that you're getting the same quality representation. And the first thing that I want to know is, do you have a good relationship with your case manager? Because as you know, Billy, the best attorneys are going to be busy. They're
Yes.
not going to be able to be there, and answer the phone call every time it's there. So first and foremost, I want to build a relationship with a case manager that's managing that case. And I spend a lot of my time working with them. Now that's for us paralegals. Fortunately, where you are in a progressive state, they've really increased the amount that you can do on that front end. But for me, it truly is a management one of like, okay, you have a relationship with somebody who can be there on the phone when you call, because that's just going to happen. And it's okay to expect for your law firm to be able to answer the phone when you call. And I think as a client, that's a reasonable expectation. And that's something that we always want to make sure is there. But that second piece is going to be, all right, do you have a written opinion letter in the case? And I don't care if your case is a small case, if we want to call it that, where it's a divorce. Recently, one of my attorneys was dealing with a client who had just lost touch with the dad of her kid. Her kid is now 16, hasn't been around since age 3. We're just trying to clean up the details. But she's never gone through this before. She was scared, and it just happens to be somebody who I know because she is at a restaurant that I frequent in our small town. And I just was checking in, and she was nervous. And I said, "Don't, there's really nothing to be nervous about. Nothing's going to necessarily change." But I said, "Did you get an opinion letter?" "Yes." "Still a written one. This is what our expectation is, because we're going to have to go find this person, or at least publish a good service." And something that is as basic as that, I still want an opinion letter that I can pick up and I can take the client when the client starts to have an unrealistic expectation that we can point to. Now, when I handle a case and a large case that's involved, I may have 7 or 8 iterations of that opinion letter throughout that case. But I think it's very important. And of course, that letter is going to probably be in a portal. It's not necessarily going to be a stamped letter. It's going to be something in writing that can point to, because I want you to know as a client that I'm going to be arguing things to the judge, and that is not what your expectation needs to be. I'm trying to present the best case possible. My attorneys are trying to present that best case possible. And if that's all you're hearing, and you're not getting any other documents or something you can look at, because I represent mostly moms. About 80% of our clientele is moms, and they worry about their cases at 3 a.m. and they're up and they're thinking about their case because it's their babies, it's their world, and it's their life, and that's what they're supposed to be doing. I want them to be able to pick that up along with their homework that we have for them to be able to work on at all times, because things that may be in their mind, that may be something to change their mind. And I want to make sure that when I talk to attorneys, I can point to every piece of the documentation that can show it. Because if they don't have that in writing to the client's so nervous at the moments when they're talking back and forth. I don't anticipate that the client's going to remember that. Frankly, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So if you've not advised your client, or your attorney is not advising you in some way of a written documentation, which may be a short email, it doesn't have to be that formal, although I prefer some formality about it, because at 3 a.m. you don't have time to dialogue. I want it to be something that says like, okay, these are the things that I know you're thinking about. And that expectation is being met. I personally think that that's where the bill of clients' rights, as a client, you should have the right to be able to communicate with your law firm. And you should be able to have something in writing that says this is what to expect. And that should be based on reality, and reality changes as the case goes through. And I think that allows me as a supervising attorney to be able to look down and say, hey, I can call this client at any time, and I can look through the facts, because we draft out in the opinion letter the facts and say, like, look, if something is wrong in these facts, then tell us. Because we're basing the rest of the opinion on these facts that you have presented to us. So if it says that you haven't smoked weed in 12 months, and you need, and the reality is, I smoke weed every day. We can deal with that, but I don't want us to go into court and say something based on those facts that are different. So that's the first part, and then I'm going to see what kind of law, and then, of course, the issue that comes up the most is this is costing too much.
Right.
This is, the costs are going out of control. Is my lawyer still supporting me? And then I can point and say, yes, here's where our expectation was. Here's where things have gotten a little bit off course. That's normal. We didn't know we were going to be dealing with attorney X, and attorney X always does these things, and that increases cost. But we can deal with that, and that's when that zone, and I can have that conversation with the client. But of course, I'm going to have it with the attorney first, and make sure that we're all on that same page. So that's how I feel like you can do that. Now, there are several layers before it gets to me. I have several just plain supervising attorneys that's what they do. So you're going to go through a little bit, but if it comes to me, I'm going to want to be able to make sure that I can talk to that client and their expectations have at least been tempered.
I love that. We have something similar called a client status memo that I require to go out on intervals. And it is so important, because as a supervisor, I need to be able to look at the client status memos and see what has happened in this case. What have we accomplished? What did we say we were going to do? And did we do it? Did we tell people how much it might cost? And it is so important because it protects the client, it protects the attorney, it protects the firm. It's just really important. And having some sort of official, like, one place you can go, because a client's file can be thousands and thousands of pages, and it can be very difficult for me as a supervisor to look at a file and figure out what's going on and determine whether or not this client who's talking to me has legitimate concerns or is just feeling a little out of touch. And so having that is so critical to my ability to communicate with everyone and keep things on track. But I also really like it for clients because they have a place where information is truth, and they can go to it and they can know that I can rely on this. And so if the strategy here isn't what we want to do, or if the cost is too much, or whatever, or if the facts are wrong, then you have an obligation to tell us. So I really like that very, very much. Now,
I love that. Their status letter is so important. And it really is kind of shocking to me when a client comes from another firm. And I know this probably happens with you a lot. Here comes this client in, and they're saying, I'm dissatisfied with my lawyer. And oftentimes that, sometimes it's, well, I'm not surprised. But sometimes it's you're kind of surprised. You're like, wait a second, I know this lawyer, and I know this lawyer does a good job in court. And I don't understand how you have become so dissatisfied that you're coming either for a second opinion, or oftentimes we terminated the relationship with that attorney. And it feels like that status letter you're talking about would have changed everything in that relationship. Because oftentimes I'm sitting there saying, like, you know what? I don't think that that the lawyer is handling this poorly or whatever the steps were, but you just had no communication. You did not realize that that judge was going to do 50-50 custody in your case. And you thought something that attorney said made you think that you were going to walk out of there with full custody. And now you're coming to me to change that opinion. And that all I can do is be able to change your expectations to a certain extent. But that communication was missed. And it's just that I can just tell that a client at your firm is going to come out knowing that, and that status letter and those things are so important. And I just feel like that there's just a world of people out there that just are very frustrated with our lawyer. And a lot of that has to do with the communication.
Sure. And then sometimes it's truly the client. Like the client will be really upset. They'll say, this hasn't moved in a million years. I don't know what we're doing with this case. I'll talk to my lawyer. I'll look at the client status memo, get on the phone with the client. And the truth is that we don't know what to do because the client hasn't made a key decision. And the key decision might be, where do I want to live? Like if you don't tell us if we're dealing with a relocation case or what type of parenting plan we are negotiating, like we are literally stuck, and we will wait for you, but your case won't make progress until you make critical decisions and communicate them with us. So that's something that I think clients should know.
Absolutely. There's so many times in which I go into it and take a look at a case. I'll think of one that's going on right now. We have a fantastic attorney. She's coming out of Wake Forest, just an excellent trial attorney, does a great job with things, and is handling a client that I know personally. It's a pretty big case. A lot of money's involved. We did a lot of work on venue to get it in front of the right county, in front of the right judge, and won those early stages. But the client is unable, without getting too detailed into it, is unable to make some decisions about her career path.
Sure.
And it's going to make a huge difference on alimony
Yeah.
in terms of way this case is going to go, and gets very frustrated because they want us to make this decision for them. We cannot make a decision of whether or not surgery needs to happen or this person needs to go from a part-time position to a full-time position. I mean, that is fully outside of my attorney's ability. And it does make, it has a legitimate, like you said, crossroads. And I think that clients do get in the position of where they want to abdicate big decisions to the attorney.
Yeah.
And the attorney is rightfully saying, I'm not going to make those decisions. Now, I think that both of us probably, because I know for me, I remember the days when the older attorneys told their clients, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. And that was kind of, I started back in the 90s, and it was not uncommon for me to hear the attorneys just tell the client, say like, well, you're quitting that job. Or I remember them telling their clients like, well, if you don't like that separation agreement, move back in with them, stay for 60 days, and then we'll go and restart this whole thing. I mean, huge things that this is just normal kind of, well, the modern attorney is not going to inject themselves into major life decisions. That decision rightfully needs to be with the client, but it does make an impact. And I'm curious, when you run into that situation, how do you approach that? Because there is part of that old school attorney in me and say like, okay, all right, if you're not going to make a decision, I'm going to tell you right now, the judge is going to tell you to go back to work and get that full-time job, because they're going to want you to maximize your own income before making a determination on alimony. but I want to be able to say like, but how am I supposed to value your possible medical conditions that prevents you from working full time? And that it is a very difficult crossroads.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing we can do is talk about consequences
Yeah.
and potential consequences and what we've seen work in the past and what we have seen blow up in the past. And then the other thing that we cannot ignore is the risk of litigation. Litigation is just unpredictable, even for those of us who do it every single day for years and years and years, who have seen hundreds of cases. We still cannot accurately predict what's going to happen in any given case.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, one of my young attorneys this past week in one of our Zooms, and I hope that the listeners, I hope we were able to kind of give you a little bit of insight as you're hearing this of the backside of the office. That although you may be dealing with one attorney, those attorneys, we talk, we're going through these cases, we're dissecting cases, we're doing a lot of work together in a group. But absolutely, the judge was 100% against our case in the morning. And we advised our client based on that about like, hey, you're probably going to have to take a plea in this situation, or well, plea not being the right word, but a consent order based on where we think we are. And now we knew that there were some other things, and the client rolled the dice and ended up in a much better spot. Now, normally it goes, I feel like I'm always having to deal with the other way around.
Right.
But here's this young attorney saying, like, how can we do this? Where,
Right.
but sure enough, the some evidence came out. But of course, that was exceedingly expensive. The one thing we can tell our clients is we don't know what the outcome is, but we do know that if you go into litigation, there's going to be high cost.
Yeah.
There's going to be high risk. That the judge rarely comes out of a case thinking, oh, well, I love you and I don't like you. The judge tends to do what judges do. And, sometimes if I don't know if you've ever gotten a chance to do this, but just, when I do, I take my young attorneys into the courtroom, we do practice cases, and I'll sit up on the bench. And when you sit there and you're 2 or 3 feet over the rest of everybody and you're looking down, you kind of want to make everybody happy. You kind of want to just snap your fingers and split the baby and come up with solutions and these things. And you're horrified when you're the attorney on that, saying like, surely it's clear, Judge, that this right opinion needs to happen. And when you turn around and as a client, you think that person that's sitting up there as a judge is not trying to make your client happy. The judge is generally trying to do what they can to maximize the parenting time between two clients that are upset, or to find a way to get both people moving on with their life financially. And they're not really as interested in the things that the clients certainly think about. And even our attorneys are like, well, this is going to change the mind. To think you're going to be able to predict that, knowing that a judge can turn. And of course, the judge turned in that case I was talking about on the most obscure part, like probably point E or F in terms of what our list was going into it. But in that case, it was some schooling and some grades that we thought were important, but maybe not, dispositive. And the judge jumped on it and ended up giving a good ruling. That's an unpredictable result, even though it was a positive result. And certainly, I think every attorney could talk about those moments where I did not see the judge coming on that. And, it certainly is something that it's impossible for us to talk to our clients with, in fact, I would say if somebody's listening to this and their attorney has guaranteed an outcome in a court hearing, then every red flag should be up. Because there are very few guarantees when it comes to a courtroom setting.
Absolutely. Your attorney needs to believe in you, needs to support you, needs to understand your position, have your back, and give you good information. If those things aren't happening, you got to get a new attorney. You need to click with your attorney. They have to get you. But if there's trying to sell you a solution that's not a you got to look the other way.
It's I will also say this: if if you're talking to an attorney who has promised you that they're going to do everything for a very low flat fee, or something like that, then the red flag should be out. I was working with one of our attorneys on a case, and it was a big case, and it was down in South Carolina, and I had made a call in to the client's mother. It's a very young father involved in the case. I said, like, hey, I just wanted to call back in with you because I know this was an emergency. Holidays was going on, and the attorney was gone. So I said, I'm just gonna give him a call. And I called, and she said, well, we found another attorney, and they were going to do it for a very cheap flat rate. And I happen to know enough about that attorney, and maybe it will work out fine. But my heart sank a little bit, and I know that sound, if you're listening to it, like, well, of course, that rich attorney must be wanting more business. And I promise you that is not the issue, because there are plenty of clients out there that need lawyers, that we can help. But when you see somebody who is in a true issue, and I think that, this is to the point that criminal action may be taken against him.
Oh,
This was not going to be the time to hire the cheapest lawyer.
right.
And it really does make you say, like, okay, and I said, like, look, I appreciate that, and I'm not going to say anything, but if you do need us, here is my personal cell phone number to text me, because I have that kind of relationship with them, and won't be shocked if I don't end up getting retained to clean up a mess that was going to cost many times, probably 10x, to clean up what might be a solution that can be done early on. I think every attorney, or at least the attorneys that we know, run into that a lot, where it's like, it's so much more difficult for me to go in and clean up a mess than it would be to get it right the first time.
Absolutely. It's a tough call to figure out, like, how much money am I willing to spend? Should I hire the best attorney I can possibly get? Not everybody and every case needs that. If you've got a simple case and it's low conflict, you should not be hiring the most expensive litigator. And even if you do, they should wrap that up real quick for you. But if you've got major money or freedom or safety on the line, you have to find the money to go work with a very reputable, very experienced lawyer. And I know that is sometimes impossible, but it's always worth it.
Yeah. And I think that in the end, how many times do you get on your TikTok and things like that, like, oh my gosh, I should have hired you.
A lot of times.
And I see that pop up on your TikToks, and it really is sort of a sinking feeling, because it's like, okay, you have to make your decisions on that. And I get it that there is some cost involved in it. But if you are listening to this and you're thinking, I don't have a trust factor with my lawyer, then what I would recommend is, first and foremost, call your lawyer up and see if you can build that trust up. If maybe there's something that is a communication thing that's missing. But if you're not able to get that, then it is 100% fine to go and change and get to another attorney. And I promise you that if you go to Modern Law and you've been with another attorney, it is not going to be starting at point zero. They're going to do the research, the background, and get caught up in a very short amount of time and take you to where you need to be. But if you don't have trust with your attorney, you're going to have some regrets at the end of your case. Yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
I just think that advice is so spot on. Like, if communication breakdowns happen in every relationship, and it might happen in your relationship with your lawyer. It could be that you have stuff going on in your life and that lawyer is working on some other case and not giving you the attention you need. That's not the time to pull the plug. Just like Brian was saying, you want to engage, re-engage, and see if that relationship can be mended. How your lawyer reacts will tell you a lot. If your lawyer starts attacking you, telling you it was your fault, is unable and unwilling to acknowledge the fact that you as the client need some additional communication, huge red flag, it's time to bail. So I've seen people do that many, many times where they've tried to talk and they just get shut down and their attorney becomes aggressive. That is the time to go find another lawyer. And just like Brian said, any good law firm will be able to pick up and help you from where you're at.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times people are scared because they're like, well, it's too late. I've gotten too far into this. And almost every good law firm that I deal with is going to be able to say, like, okay, we can take those pieces and move forward. And Billy, I'll be honest with you. I've had a couple of clients where I'm like, you know what? You're especially, I think of some hostile clients that are they're just pains. I'll just leave it at that. And I realized, like, our firm is not really designed for that person.
Yeah.
And I've had talks and I've said, like, you know what? We could do a good job for you, but you are never going to be happy because, you're doing some things just based on revenge. And I just don't have it. I'm too old to spend my time on revenge. And, there's a lot of move on that I have in my life at this point. And if that is your sole goal, then I'm probably going to talk to you and say, like, hey, as a law firm, I bet you I can find you a criminal type lawyer that's going to love to dig in and do those things. That's just not what our firm's about. And that, it may be that person is, hey, then you need to go to that other firm, whatever that's going to be. Now, tough, being a bulldog in the courtroom, that's what we're going to be. But I'm not going to fight your personal revenge fight. And there may be attorneys out there that can. And so that relationship can go both ways. And there's certainly times where I think that a client has been abusive, sexist, even racist towards some of our attorneys. I have no use for that.
No.
We move on, so definitely look at yourself and say, like, okay, am I making this easy or harder on my lawyer? But I think that for the most part, what I see is attorneys, especially in some smaller practices, they just get really busy. They get, they had the right intentions. Maybe they charged a very small fee. The case has gotten out of their hands, and they don't want to let it go, or they don't want to, what they feel like is disappointing the client. The client's certainly not happy. That is a time where I think those steps you need to be able to make and say, like, okay, let me make that decision and move on. And when you say that your lawyer should be very respectful of that. That should be a very easy transition, and that should not be something that you have to apologize about. That you can say, I just would feel better trusting someone else at this point, and move on.
Brian King, located in North Carolina, South Carolina, and now Tennessee. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think it's going to be really, really valuable for our audience. And if you all have enjoyed this show, make sure to like it, download it, leave a review, and we'll make sure to have all of Brian's contact information in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Billy. Absolutely love it.
Thanks so much for listening to the Modern Divorce Podcast. Remember, anything you've heard today or anything you read online is not the replacement for actual consultation with an attorney and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Even if you called in and we spoke to you, you were anonymous and we don't have your details and you have not become a client of Modern Law. However, we would love to speak with you, or you should seek out the advice of legal counsel or counseling or any other expert near you. And if you have an idea for a show topic or you need to speak with an attorney in Arizona, you can reach me at info@mymodernlaw.com.